Hey everyone, thanks for coming today. Hope you guys are enjoying the start of Plain April.
No,
No.
I woke up way too early for that.
What time did you get up?
5:50 or 5:45.
Oh, it's painful.
Yeah, we did the Griffith sunrise.
Oh, nice. Today,
But no
hope you
plan,
guys
no
are
gain.
enjoying the start of Plain April. That sunrise is something else up there.
No,
No.
I woke up way too early for that.
What time did you get up? Oh, Kaylee, I think the YouTube is playing. It's coming through on your Discord. That's okay. Maybe just mute the YouTube. I had to do that for one of the demos. All right, so I'm gonna just get started sharing a couple minutes of my work, just so you guys know, like who's demoing and my background, and might help you ask any questions. Um, Today's demo will be about an hour and a half. I'll probably go a little over, depending. Um, but you're welcome to ask questions. I think in the beginning, if you want to put your questions in the special event chat or on YouTube, that'd be great. And then once I get sort of started with the demo, then you'll feel free to like unmute yourself and just ask a question. Another thing to note is in the special event chat, I posted a photo that I'll be referencing today. So if you wanted to paint along, or just if you want to paint along, that photo will be helpful. So so this is my website. I do background design on Rick and Morty, and I'll just show. I didn't paint this one here. This is the design. So I love drawing. I love building worlds out and filling them with color. At work I do just the lines. So going plein air painting is a way for me to get those colors mixing and just have a lot of fun. So this is my website if you want to check it out, and then I'll show a couple of my traditional pieces, because today's demo is going to be digital and it's very different than, say, something like this, which is oil painting, where I used to live in Pennsylvania. And then this was one of my first Warrior Painter plein airs, actually. Down just a park overlooking downtown LA. Watercolor, I like oil paints as well. This is Vasquez Rocks, another Warrior Painter event. I forget which beach this was. I think this is Santa Monica. Oil painting. And another oil painting. I think this is a reservoir in the city. Oh, yeah. And I'll show a couple digital sketches too. Just really briefly. This is kind of my digital style. And one thing that I stress whenever I demo is that every painting is different. Like I'll try to follow formulas or practice different people's techniques, but every painting is different, and that's part of the joy of it. So I don't have a set process. Okay, so that's a little bit about me and my work. And now let's let's start painting. Okay, I think that is showing up. And actually, you guys can really ask questions anytime. If there's something that really, if I go too fast or something that you want to know more about, just dive in. So, this is a hike that I do a couple times a week with my dogs, and I just love these mountains. It's Brand Park in California, in Southern California, and the mountains are pretty deserty. You know, it's just a lot of dirt and scrub brush and foxtail and coyotes, and rocks. But in the morning, it's just so nice how the light hits the mountain. So I snapped this photo on my cell phone and chose it for my demo today. But I whenever I'm painting digitally, I try to make some photo adjustments or adjustments to the photo before I start. So first thing I'm going to do, and I'll be painting in black and white for about half of the demo. I turn my subject into black and white, and I will often break it up into different pieces. So we've got tree layers, um, and we've got mountain and sky. And what I did with this, oops, is I kind of cut it up so that I moved the foreground kind of to the left and down. So part of my thinking here is this mountain, I wanted it to feel a little more tall. When it's looking just like this, it's a very kind of horizontal feeling, but I wanted this mountain to feel like tall, and to me that just makes it more majestic. So I'm putting a new composition and I'm cropping in, which is always good for me because um, it keeps it more simple. I tend to overcomplicate. So by cropping in, I'm taking out some info, and then this red circle, that's my focal point. That's what I really care about in the image. So by moving the foreground down here, I made this mountain taller, and I'm going to have a vertical composition to also kind of um, add to that sort of vertical quality. Another thing that really struck me was this beam of sunlight coming in. So I'm going to try to tackle that towards the end. Um, yeah, we'll see how it goes. I feel like sunbeams can be pretty tricky, but if you get it right, it's wonderful. So here's my shifted pieces that I've cropped them, and let's dive in. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to analyze like the major elements and then um, sketch them out. So I'm going to pick a dark tone. I'm going to pick a brush. I'm just using brushes. Yeah, I take a lot of different classes, and I just pick up a bunch of brushes from different artists. And I will say today I am trying to use a couple techniques. My major painting inspirations are Richard Schmid, who wrote Alla Prima. I'll just write that up here. Richard Schmid. Alla Prima. It's a great book, especially if you're interested in plein air painting. But it's a book on just how to paint. So I'm going to be using some of Richard Schmid's techniques. I'm going to be using some of John Park, some of his techniques, and then I'll try another inspiration for me is Angela Sung. I'll try to tap into some of her like color, the way that she does color. But in the end, I'm just gonna sketch this. So let's have some fun. Feel free to sketch along and post like any works in progress. Okay. All right. So sometimes when I start demoing, I get a little shaky. So let's just try to sketch this out. And I'll toggle between the eraser and the brush a lot. So I will be hitting a bunch of hotkeys, but it's usually just brush and erase. So this peak here is my focal area. And for that reason, I will spend the most amount of time here. Also, sometimes if I want to throw out a drawing, I'll go Control A, select all, and just delete, and just Control D to deselect and go back. And I'm going to switch it up a little bit too. I'm going to use the line tool to draw. Okay. I find the line tool is really helpful for, I think, seeing measurements better. When I draw, sometimes proportions get really out of whack. Not sure why, but I find this line tool is pretty helpful. All right, getting some indecision here. That's okay. Sometimes you have to sketch something multiple times to really see what's going on. And these mountains fascinate me, especially hiking in these mountains, because I think they tell, well, when they're full of like plants and nature, and being in Los Angeles, it's kind of cement, a lot of cement everywhere. So, but I think that these mountains kind of tell a story, like just how the erosion is set in. It's a very arid environment, but when it rains, the water, like if you go hiking right after a rain, the water cuts through all the rocks and creates all sorts of textures and forms. Go down here. I'm going to sketch out some of this road. These bushes down here. Got a tree kind of over here. Now I'm trying to take the reference literally right now, but I'm always keeping an eye open for ways to maybe change the reference. Sketching in. This is like the layout design side of my brain right now. Okay. So we've got some mountains. We've got actually some distant mountains back here. And we have these foreground bushes. And I kind of want this to lead around this way. Okay. I'm going to choose just a couple. I just want to make sure I know where I'm at in my drawing here. So I'm actually going to highlight a few of these kind of light patches. Now, I'm doing this in black and white on Photoshop because I would do this anyway if I was plein air painting. And the way to do this when you're plein air painting is to squint your eyes until they're almost fully shut, and it kind of fuzzes out the color. It makes the color less important, and you can see values. So I just used the hue saturation slider to get the same effect here. Move some pieces around. Okay. I'm going to try this for now. We'll see how far this sketch takes me. I'm going to rename this sketch. Okay. Now I'm basically going to be making layers and labeling them. So this is distant mountains. I'm going to make my sketch less opacity. And I'm going to do something that may be frowned upon in some circles, but I'm going to color pick from my reference here. Now, I think color picking is a great way to kind of see what's actually there, because the photo is technically accurate. So let me actually put my sketch on the top. So it's good if you're just trying to figure out what's going on in your image. Because if I was to bring this color image back up, it's really hard for me to just guess what value that is. And you can see the hue saturation bar up here kind of jittering around, and that's because there's a million colors just in that one spot. And so at the start of the painting, I want to keep it simple for myself, since this is a study. Okay, that's the distant mountain. Then I'm going to make a layer called BG, and that just means background, and that's this mountain here. I'm going to pick kind of just an average local color of this mountain. And I can overpaint down here because I'm going to have my foreground layers of my trees. They're going to be on top of this. So I typically will overpaint there. And then up here, I'll want to trim to make sure I have a clear silhouette. So I'll use the lasso tool and kind of cut out my overpaint. And I'm keeping all of my layers separate, just in case I want to come back and make some adjustments. While I'm doing a digital study, might as well use all the tools that I know about. Okay. Let's zoom out here. So now I'm noticing the difference between the background and distant mountain is they're getting blurred. So I'm actually going to take that distant mountain and use the hue saturation slider to lighten it. Next up, we've got the midground, which I'm just counting as this dirt. So I'll color pick an average local color there to start with. And there's this trail that goes up. I'm going to take my sketch, select this tree that I drew. I think I'm going to move that tree off to the side a little more. Now, while I'm doing this, I am kind of looking at these graphic shapes, trying to get them to flow, but also to read. One thing you'll see me do throughout the demo is I'll stamp a texture brush just to get a little deckled edge on parts. So sometimes I'm just stamping, which makes me think like maybe I should bring a sponge on some of my plein air trips. I don't have a sponge. Okay, so there's some foreground land. I'm going to lighten that up too. Then we've got some bushes. And for the bushes, I'm going to pick an average local color again. And you're going to see me do this a lot. I'm going back to the background and darkening it. I start with the color pick from the photo reference, but then I will adjust at will. Happy little bushes. Getting these kind of placed. Again, I am over painting, and so I'll come back in and trim these a little bit. And there's bushes that kind of are on the side of this trail going up. Okay. Actually, I'm going to sort of cheat a little bit. I'm going to put some bushes over here. Even though I know when you hike, this little section is actually another little mountain, but I'm just going to kind of cheat and like make more bushes, I guess. We'll see if that works. Now, if I were like plein air painting, I wouldn't be able to do all these like back and forth and hemming and hawing, but I would try to do a pencil sketch and maybe even a value sketch before starting, and that's kind of the equivalent of this back and forth. To erase now, maybe I'll use the lasso tool to kind of get some of these grassy textures. I'm just deleting out. Don't want it to be too digital feeling. And I think I feel that way because this is a more natural scene. If this was like a Neo Tokyo cityscape or something with like buildings, you might want a more digital feel. But I'm going for more naturalistic. Cutting away at these. Another okay. All right. So I'm going to move on to the trees. Now the trees are kind of tricky because they can get lost. They get pretty dark, but they also get pretty light. So when color picking from them, you usually want a dark tone. You can see my slider up here. I think too dark and it might be hard to see, but if it's above 50%, trees typically are darker because they're vertical and they only the very tops, like up here, catch the light. And you see even that highlight is like a 40% gray. So I'll go down to 30. Block in some trees. I really only have 2 trees here. This is kind of a landing on top of a hike. So you hike up this steep trail and you get to this landing. And the landing is called the 7 trees. I think there's more than 7, but there's not that many. It's a pretty scraggly grove. So there's only 2 trees in this whole picture. Okay, got our trees somewhat in. I think, let's see. I think I'm going to turn off my sketch now. I might turn it back on, but the lines are starting to interfere with like how I'm seeing these graphic shapes. So I want to just spend a moment and look at things just purely shape, no line. Cutting in here a little bit. Want the tree to feel a little fluffy. And over here as well. Just cutting into that sharp silhouette and putting some air in there. Okay. All right, so I've got distant mountains. I've got the main mountain. I've got, um, I should change this to foreground. This is the foreground. I've got bushes and I've got some trees. The only other thing I think I really want to like maybe just make a mask for is this, which is this beam of light. So if I hit Control H, it's going to make the selection disappear, and you can see that beam of light. So something like that. I'm going to label that beam. And I'll just pick kind of a light color. And this is just to remind myself to like that I have this selection and I can use this later. Okay. So next, right now I just have a bunch of graphic shapes. And painting is a lot about color and light. So I'm going to start adding in some value variations. So I have the sky here, and I'll work back from to front. So for sky, what I'm going to do first is, so we see there's a gradient here, right? From this is like 89% all the way to 66. So that's actually a decent range. I will color pick for the value and make adjustments. And I'll color pick for my color too, but it's going to be a little more like pick and then adjust. So I'll take that color too, and I might pump it up a little bit. Okay. So one thing I did here is I put a dark and a light on the same layer. I don't actually want to do that. I want to create a dark layer. I'll label it dark, and a light layer. So let's go back. Color picking, putting some light or some dark, and I'll put my light underneath the dark. And I will also bring out the smudge tool. I should maybe airbrush this. Actually, yeah, I'm going to, instead of painting this, I'm going to select all and delete. And then I'm going to take out the gradient tool. So painting with gradients is good too, especially for the sky, because the sky is just so soft. But I will want to put some texture back in there later. But for now, I just want a sense of light kind of going across. So you can see without these, it's flat. And with these, it's a little better. little more depth. All right. And for the distant mountain, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to pick a dark side, create a clipping mask. And oh, it's really dark. Okay. It's so dark, I'm getting confused with my foreground mountain here. So I'm going to darken that mountain just so I can see a little more what's happening back there. Keeping it pretty simple back here. And let's see, it's going to erase a little bit. Yeah, see, I will like nitpick stuff in the background like that. I need to move forward. So I can always take care of stuff like that later. So let's move to this main mountain. This is the star of my portrait here. I'm picking a dark tone. I'm going to bring back my sketch. And I'm going to try to create basically another set of graphic shapes that's going to break this between light and dark. Just 2 steps, light and dark. And this is where you can spend a lot of time, because if there's something off with this structure, whether it's with your drawing or with your black and white, whenever you put color on top, it's never gonna, like, I don't know, if problems come up, there's no way to solve them usually except to go back and fix something that's not working with the values. I'd say 99% of the time it's your drawing or your values. If you're getting frustrated or it's not working out how you want, just take a step back and go slower than you were before. It's really hard to do this when you're plein air painting, because I don't know about you guys, but when the light is changing, it's like that ticking clock effect, and you're just trying to put some paint down and understand what you're seeing, and the light is changing. So, but I think if you just slow down, things usually kind of work out better. So there's a ton of details in these shadows that I really want to paint, but that's not my focus right now. My focus is this sun-struck patch of mountain. And if I ever forget that, sometimes I'll just bring up my focal point and even work with it on, so that if I start to go out of bounds, like, can just bring myself back in. Okay. So yeah, I'll take some time and really get these textures. Um, I think in like portraiture, they say you want to spend the most time on the eyes or important features like that. So it's kind of what I'm doing here. It's a little hard to see because I'm painting kind of like a dark tone on a dark tone. But once we do some lighter colors in there, I think it'll have like a strong graphic shape. So this can actually even come down a little bit, maybe. I'm using one brush for the most part. It's like one round texture brush. Just using hotkeys to scale the brush up and down in size. And let's see. So this little patch here is kind of out of bounds of my focal area, so I'll just leave it simple for now. Let's see, is there anything else that I want to do here? Yeah, this feels like it could go out this way more. So I'm going to take away the sketch now. I think the sketch is getting a little distracting in some parts. This area here is a little muddled. Let's bring it back. Let's see. So if you can like pay attention and capture these shapes, you will kind of get that story of the mountain that I was talking about. Like there's a reason that the erosion is the way it is, and that the mountain is shaped that the way it is. Not to say that you can't like ever change things or riff on your own design. That's great too. But for learning purposes, trying to understand this mountain. Okay. We'll see. We'll see what happens here. Work a little bit up here. And I'm realizing this peak is a little bit too much, so I'm going to just take the eraser, carve back into my primary shape. And so this is nice, right? I can change the large graphic shape, and I can change the kind of shadow graphic shapes. All right, so I'll stick with that for the mountain. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to some of the other elements and do the same treatment. So moving up to the foreground, I'm going to create a dark layer. Sometimes I'll just put D for dark and then L for light, if you don't want to type it over and over again. So I'm going to select this color that I've chosen and just pull it. You can pull it halfway to dark or halfway to black, like whatever color you picked. You can put about halfway to black. I might put it up a little higher than that. And that's just a quick way of, actually, I think it does need to be darker. It's a quick way of kind of finding a shadow tone that will work. So this hiking trail over here is covered in shadow. Getting a little muddled with the bushes. So, this is tricky. I'm going to just keep going with these shadows here. And I might run a texture across here too, very subtly. This is like just a noise brush. And as it goes further into the distance, I will shrink the brush size. See if I can make this brush really big and stamp it here and see. Okay, yeah, I can get some kind of stamping effect there. Here we go. Just enough to indicate that there's texture. All right, let's go to the bushes and do our darks. So I will color pick here. Go back to my brush that I was using before and just try to carve out some form, basically. Again, always over painting, and then I'll cut back. There's no expensive paints to worry about wasting the paint because it's all pixels. But when you're painting plein air, you shouldn't stress about that either. Try not to, at least. And making the brush large to kind of stamp and get some noise. I can even make this brush large and stamp back with more noise. Okay. Yeah, this is starting to get like fun, I guess. I don't know. Like sometimes the setup stages are a little difficult, like just hard. And then I feel like that's one of the best feelings in a study or a painting or an image is when you set up a good foundation and it actually starts working, and then um, everything you build on top of it has this sound. It looks good. Okay. Trying to make these shadows a little less clumsy over here. Chipping away at the top where I think that there's going to be like light hitting the tops of these grasses. And this is where like visiting a place and having personal experience with the place really helps because I've hiked this a bunch, so I know almost not like the names of the plants, but kind of know what they look like. Okay, so next let's go to the trees. Let me save this real quick too, just in case. All right, let's get the graphic shape of these trees. Now notice here how the black of the shadow on the tree is darker than the black of the shadow of the mountain. And that's through atmospheric perspective. I think we can see that here if we actually color pick. So if we take shadow side of the mountain here, I think that's about an 11, and the tree is about a 7. So I wonder if my camera is, that might be an effect of the camera, but the tree is darker. I think the camera might have made everything a little too dark. That's another reason not to like necessarily blindly color pick from photos because um, it's amazing the difference between like a Samsung and a Apple cameras and all the other types of cameras that are out there. So get to know your camera and what its um, tendencies are. Okay, I'm over painting again. I'll come back and cut into that later. All right, so I will start cutting back in. I can take away my focal point thing for now. And I do want to spend some time on these, like these other elements, but I want to make sure I'm saving most of the time for the focal area. Okay. And over here, using the texture of the brush to kind of stamp some leaves in there. If the tree was my focal point, I would definitely want to know like what shape are the leaves and like what type of tree is it, and um, get really specific with that. But for this painting, I'm going to simplify. Okay. All right, so we have graphic shapes and some shadows on them. So let's put some light on them now. So back to our distant mountain underneath the dark layer. I'm going to put a light layer. And I think this is some stone that is like on the surface of the mountain. So it gets kind of a nice bright white. Take that color. Super subtle back here. Can really just be like a couple marks. Doesn't have to be anything big. This is what needs to be big. So this focal area. Now you can see here, there's actually, this is a trail. And so this is going to be quite a lot lighter than the bright side of the trees. So I'm going to stick with the tree color for right now. And I'll put the trail highlights on later. And I'm painting underneath my value or my dark layer. And that's going to allow me to just like preserve the graphic shadows that I spent, a good amount of effort trying to get them looking nice. Yeah, that's like super noisy. So what I want to do is just erase away. I'm going to smudge a little bit. So I'm going to fill this with kind of a lighter tone. And I'm going to take this graphic shadow and smudge it around a little bit. Let's see. So like in here, it's a bit harsh. Smudge is going to eat up my graphics processor, so I might lag a little bit. Like this mountain, it's kind of rolling over, and before it was a bit sharp, so I want to get some of that form. Especially, yeah, where the form turns. So we don't want it to be sharp all over for sure. Just rounding out some of these edges. Cool thing about this too is I can always come back in. If I've over smudged, that's okay. I'm going to come in with the eraser and just erase away a little bit. So we get a nice kind of variety of edges. Lagging, there we go. Popping out. These trees are just catching the morning light. So wherever the light is striking those trees, I want to make sure that's crisp. But sometimes the shadows get pretty soft. Let me just zoom out, getting a little sucked in there. Another thing I'm noticing is that this value does seem a bit light. So I'm going to darken it a little bit. And I'm going to do something else here. This I'm going to call a midtone. And basically what I'm seeing is that it's kind of all flat, all one color. I want it to feel like light is pouring down from the top. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to darken around the base, like down here, just a subtle. Let me see if I toggle that on and off. Yeah, so it kind of just the light's down lower, just a little darker now. I'm noticing that this edge here, that looks a little too straight, compared to what's going on this. This is very bumpy. So let me spend a little more time with that. So I'll take my shadow layer and I can cut into it. Trying to really take my time on these values because once we get going with color, it's going to move very quickly. And if these values are working, the color should work. This is kind of a mess over here. Let's see if I can do something with this mess. Oops. Okay. Wait, I feel like something's off here. Make sure I have the right brush here. Okay, yeah, there we go. Yeah, this needs to be like more hidden, more overlap. More mysterious. And I'm putting a lot of texture in here, and it's kind of manual texture. I'm kind of doing it manually. But I'm going to want to come back and smudge some of that just a little bit. Wherever I feel like it's a little too much. Okay. So I'm just going to zoom out a bit. Okay. Let's see where we can go next. All right, so for the foreground, we're going to put in a light layer as well. So I'll select from the layer that I have and I'll push it up halfway to light. And I'll bring back that noise texture brush. might erase away certain areas just to get some sharper edges. Okay. Then for the bushes, I'm going to add some light as well. For this, I do want my texture back. There we go. Now, one thing I'm noticing is that these highlights on the bushes are competing kind of a lot with the mountain, and the mountain's my focal point. So I'm going to just hue saturation this and just lower the value. Okay. It's got a little bit of variation on the bushes. And the next are the trees. And then we're almost ready to transition to color. So again, I might, near the bottom of the tree, I might erase away a little more and let like the brightest brights be on the tippy tops of the trees, as it should be. Okay. I am missing one thing here. So on these bushes, I forgot about the bushes back here, which I kind of like that line, that directional line of light there. I think it adds some interest. Okay, so coming back up to the mountain, I've got this mid-tone. I'm going to put a highlight on here. And that's where I'm going to actually grab, whatever this tone is, 61%. This, I hope, is going to like really convince the eye of the viewer to spend some time. Are these little trail lines. A few like little flecks of highlight, darken that for some of these. Okay. Now I'm going to do one more thing here, which is I am going to add this beam. And so what I'm doing is I'm going to select my shadow layer and then mask this new layer that's going to be sunbeam. So I will only paint on the shadows. So I'm definitely overpainting here. Let's see. Take a soft brush and kind of like work out some of that. And I might smudge a bit too. So yeah, this smudge is gonna eat up all my GPU. That's okay. Sometimes when Photoshop lags out, it's actually good. It's a good moment to just like sit back and and reflect on the image. Now I'm going to do another thing here, which is called alpha lock, so that I'm only painting now just on this misty bit. I want some of the mist to be darker in this area. And then as the mountain gets further and further away, like up where the sunbeam starts, I want that to be lighter. Ooh, Photoshop's lagging hard. Too bright. I'm going to bring in some softness. And I'll smudge that. Okay, I really want to go in and do all these little bushes, and especially these, I will at some point, maybe I'll just do it now. I do want to get like the form of the mountain, because I feel like these are big arms kind of coming down. I want to hint at that a little bit, but I also want to get to color here. So let me color pick the shadow side of the mountain, and I'm going to make a shadow that's even a little darker, just super subtle. Just to create a little more form in the shadows. And these are also good leading lines, like directional leading lines, to help bring the viewer up to the focal point. These even go up into here. Maybe I'll stop where the mist kind of starts. Okay. Okay, let me just zoom out. I'm going to take this new shadow layer and smudge it. So if I start with this one, I'm going to smudge it up. And this one I'm also going to smudge up. This one I'm going to smudge just to show the turn of the form. This one I'm going to smudge just because it's too sharp. And then I'm also going to put a gradient on this. So how I'm going to do that is I'm going to do an alpha lock just on these shadow parts. And I have the color up here in my slider. And where it's closer to the sunbeam, I actually want to lighten that shadow a bit. Let me just make sure that it's, oops. Oh, I opened up. I don't know if this happens to you guys, but sometimes I'll hit hotkeys and then I'll open up like Adobe Help Desk.
Oh yeah, that definitely happens. I don't need your help, Adobe. I'm trying to paint here. And
It's
it's
so
looking great,
true.
by the way, Sean. It's awesome.
Oh, thanks. I hope it's reading. Sometimes I'll pull things out, try to stand away from it.
Yeah, step back, right? Simulate that.
Yeah. Um, Back in art college, I went to kind of a fine art school. We would have to like set our stuff. This was before well, I didn't have a cell phone at the time, but cameras weren't really on phones, and we had to like set our painting down at one end of the hallway, and then like walk to the other end of the hallway to try to get that distance.
The manual zoom out.
Yeah. Okay, so I just put a little lighter tone on those shadows, and I think that might actually work. Let me just go back into the history. I'm going to try this one more time. And actually, I'm going to make it more complicated here, just a little bit. I'm going to select just those extra shadow things and make a new layer so that I can paint on the shadows. And then I could also erase away, and I'll erase away actually using a gradient. So I'm going to take a gradient, and on the layer mask here, this is a little complicated, but I just want a little more form of the mountains to appear right here. So try this again.
So for some reason, your cursor is not matching the screen. So when you're pointing there, the cursor was actually on the top right of the menu bars.
Oh, really? Let me
But if you can't fix that, maybe you could just add a new layer and just use a circle, or just use some other color to circle it. But yeah, just letting you know.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Franklin. Let me try another color here. So yeah, I was just trying to make it so, as the light comes this way, um, that shadow layer gets more light on the right-hand side, just with that. And if any of these layers are too much, I can just take down the opacity here. Okay. Now I do want to spend more time in these foreground bushes, but I'm not going to because it's color time. So actually, just one more thing. Now for color, I am going to color pick as well on this one. And I do that for a couple of reasons, but I do want to encourage people to try color picking for studies if you've never tried it before, because it can really help you see what you're looking at in an objective way. Like, so if you don't trust your color sense totally, um, this is a great way. So I'm going to bring out my whole image here, and so that I can color pick from some things outside of my frame. And let's just give this a try. I'm going to, first thing I like to do when I go into color is take the brush that I'm working with, which should be this one, and add color dynamics. Franklin, can you see my cursor adjusting the sliders or no?
No, I can see the sliders just sliding.
Okay. Magic sliders. Was it showing before the cursor?
I
And then
think
it
at a
stopped?
certain point, your stream somehow just the cursor becomes weird. I think it's a streaming thing, a bug, but you'll be fine.
I think it's when I asked Adobe for help without wanting to.
Yeah, they're just making you suffer now.
But just to give you guys an example, see, let me bring this up to the top. When you do color jitter, it's just going to give a little bit of variety that when I take the slider and move it around, you may not be able to see the cursor, but if you look at the color slider, it's jumping around like crazy. So this color dynamics is a way to simulate that variety. Um, I think the ultimate way to learn would be um, take your image and color pick it for one version, and then do it again um, without color picking. Oops. So what I'm trying to do here is basically paint directly on top of my layer. So I don't know if you can see in the lower right corner, there's a lock symbol going on and off. So I'm doing the / button. That's alpha lock, and it's only going to paint on the light. It's not much light showing up there. I'm going to come back to that later. For the dark, I'll color pick kind of the darker side. So there's more coming on the dark side there. And the sky is a bit like noisy, digitally, like you can clearly tell it's color dynamics, but that's okay. We've got the smudge tool to kind of push things around a little bit. I like a little texture in the sky. So again, I'm going back to front. So I'm going to go to the distant mountains next. I'm going to pick what I think is a generic local color from back there and paint the, oops, didn't have alpha lock on. So alpha lock's on. Painting the local color of the distant mountain. Now I will paint the shadow by selecting this kind of blue tone. You can see that you could see a little bit better. I'm going to go to the light side. See, this is why I like color picker, because if I was to mix this, in my mind, I'm like green, woods, and shrubs plus warm yellow light. And that is what's happening, but what I'm getting is a really desaturated, that's like 6% saturation. So I just learned something there, about how desaturated it might get back there. If I was painting that plein air, I probably would have made it too saturated. That's my typical habit. All right, let's keep moving forward. So let's go to the main mountains, alpha lock, select a generic color. Will that work? Yeah. It's hard to see sometimes if it's working here because I do have a few layers going on. And the shadow layer is perhaps the biggest element of this. So I'm actually going to color pick a few times for the shadow layer. So if I'm going to pick down here for a shadow layer near the base, put a tone, then I'll sort of work my way up the mountain. Over here. Oh, okay. Didn't have my alpha lock on. Or did I? Thought I did. And this is why, plein air is just sometimes just way better than well, I mean, always way better than digital. I guess like I should say working from life is better than a photograph. Because there's less. Actually, I'm going to change my mind again. I think it's just like with working with Photoshop, there's so many tools and hotkeys and things it can clutter, I guess, focus, and it takes a lot longer to get used to than traditional, I think.
Do you feel like there's a steeper learning curve versus like when you just, okay, I got brush, I got palette, and you got paints, let's go?
I think so, because like this color jitter in the sky, it's natural when you're mixing pigment on the brush.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. What do you think, Franklin?
Yeah, I think there's just like a lot of hindrance with digital, but once you get past the learning curve, you can actually control a lot. But the initial part of like, okay, I got to go through this step and then that step and then to get this and that, versus there's a simplicity of traditional and just being out there and painting in the time limit that just makes you quicker on deciding things.
I definitely agree on the time limit. Like painting from nature when the sun is moving, it's just you can't um, fuss too much. You just gotta go.
Yeah, I have a funny equivalent. It's like farm to table versus like if you're in Photoshop, you gotta go through processing, you gotta go through all these things.
Oops, gotta put my alpha lock on. Always forgetting that. So now I'm just going like through each of these layers, the midtones. This was the highlight. Um, I'll just manually select this color here. Alpha lock, gotta remember that. That kind of jumps off nice. I'm gonna take it down a little bit as it goes further back. So I'm just darkening it. Okay, so I've got my highlights, I've got shadow, I've got the secondary shadow stuff, which I need to also do. Waiting for Photoshop. Do you guys see when the color cursor opens up, or
Yeah, that
okay,
works.
interesting. Now I'm wondering, like, what is this darkness here? That's okay. That's my shadow layer. First shadow layer. Yeah, I think that's kind of working. Um, half the image is still in black and white, but I think it's coming together. Let's see. So this is, I'm like forgetting which layer this is. Hence, writing down what it is important. I think this is a gradient of some type. So wherever there's shadow, it's getting a lot of blue from the sky. That's kind of a hallmark of the weather out in Southern California, is that it's just so sunny, and that gives you really warm lights, and it gives you um, really blue shadows. So I'm going to take this sunbeam, make a color sunbeam. That's where I'll directly pick from up here. Whoa, okay, that's alpha lock. Better. Is that working? That should be selected. Oh, okay. Um, okay. Let me start over. So I want to paint on the sunbeam. And sometimes what I do if I'm unsure of something is I'm going to duplicate it. So Control J and just hide one of them. So if I really royally mess this up, that's okay. I have a backup. Oops, and I forgot alpha lock again. So I'm just trying to paint directly this sunbeam. And I'll smudge that. Just a little bit or a lot of it. Let's see. Okay. Now I feel like there are some things I want to change with the color, but I'm going to wait until I have the other areas figured out as well. And one thing I was noticing looking at this ref too, I'm going to color pick this area here, but I feel like it's a little more purple. So I want to put a little bit of, this is just some extra color I'm putting in the sky. And this over here is like this almost warm turquoise. Putting a little bit of that. And I can always do the handy dandy Gaussian blur to just push that texture down a little bit. Okay. The other thing I'm noticing here up on the sunbeam is I kind of want the top of the sunbeam to have like a little bit of, I don't know, it just needs to be like lighter somehow. Maybe I'll go with like a golden light color and then take the opacity down a good amount just to see if this works. Uh, Gets too saturated. Okay. Come back to that later. I've got about like, I might go a little bit over, but I have about roughly like 10 more minutes to try to finish the color. So while I'm going to be doing a similar action here where I'm just going to each layer, selecting it, like the foreground here, applying an alpha lock, color picking. I want to make sure that I've got that color dynamics on. I keep selecting it and unselecting it. So let me just bring that back. So at this point, if anyone has like any specific questions or general questions, I'd be happy to try to answer some. Feel free to
Yeah. Feel
unmute
free to
yourself.
put it in the special event chat and we'll help you ask these questions. If you're not shy, feel free to unmute.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm liking this process, Sean. It almost feels like those black and white photos restoration.
Yeah. It is kind of like that. And I think like if I was working on an illustration, I wouldn't be sticking as closely to the photo. I might do this process a number of times, like 3 or 4 times, and then go to like imagination or something else. So, but this process is really nice. I picked up a lot of it from John Park, and Um, it's just I don't know. Take some of the confusion out of it, out of painting. Bushes
Yeah,
in
that's really
there.
cool. You get to like really focus on what is going on in the scene and without second guessing as much.
Yeah, it's less original. I'd say that's the drawback, but very good learning experience. Now wait, this sometimes I forget which layer is which, so I can hit if you have the arrow key selected and I hold down Control, it's going to let me select those layers. Oops. Got trees, got the foreground. Let's see, alpha lock the tree. Got to label these dark, light, dark side. Got the alpha lock.
So we got a question here. Celestial asked if after you sketch your painting, have you ever just moved on to color first and then add the small details in?
Yeah, good question, Celestial. Yes, that's actually the way I've done it most of the time. Most of the time, I have avoided the kind of black and white phase. Um, First off, like in traditional, you can do the same black and white process called like the grayscale technique or the grisaille technique, and it's tough. I don't know if anyone else out there has tried it. It's really tricky. Um, I feel like a lot of the techniques are like I don't know. It's hard. I feel like some of the techniques are lost, like with the old masters, on how exactly to do grisaille like really effectively. Um, and I think it is good to get to a point where you can see like the color, the value together, and you can kind of combine those steps. But yeah, breaking the steps apart is also really, really helpful. Okay, so I'm going to just reflect on this a little bit. Going to flip it, get a fresh perspective. And so I think my eye is definitely drawn up towards those mountains. I think it has some of that feel of the sunbeam and morning light. Um, but it's still lacking a few things. So just looking here, sometimes what I'll do, I'm going to break the mold out of this process, and I'm going to start painting directly on top of this. I may jump back to that mold, but I'm noticing like this ground just doesn't feel. It just feels like a digital mush. So I'm going to go in here, color pick. I'm not necessarily going to color pick from the photo anymore, unless I want to, but I'm going to play around with my own colors here in the slider. Um, I might even switch to RGB for this phase because I'm less focused on value, and more focused on getting kind of the right color. Not that this slider isn't also about value, but start like painting directly in. More blue. Again, I like to overpaint. Can color pick within the painting. And then erase away. Smudge, I'll use smudge. If it gets like just too out of control. So it's really like a back and forth, adding and subtracting and pushing things around, seeing what works. Curious what this color is up here. There's too many like perfect edges in some of these spots. So I'm going to break those up. Bushes never have like a, unless the whole style of something you're working on is like a flat graphic style, bushes are never going to have a perfect base. I'm going to come up back into these mountains a bit. Make a new layer. And I think one thing that's lacking from these mountains, this is the danger of just color picking like one hue to represent a whole graphic area, is that I'm missing a lot of greens and maybe even like purples in there. I don't know. So I want to push it a little bit. Push a little more color back up in here. Like down in here, this is something about this. What is this? If I right click that, that's this gradient. But underneath that gradient, what is that? Okay, that's the shadow shape here. I'm going to smudge this a bit. And then I'll come back up. And I want to thread a little more green in here. So if I color pick some of these areas, I can take down the red and like push up the green and maybe keep the blue around where it's at. So it's almost barely imperceptible, but that little bit of green I think was maybe missing. Just kind of sprinkling this green around the focal area. Maybe making it lighter. Maybe I can make a little bit of a lighter green up in here. So, at the start, I was using a lot of John Park techniques to get these graphic areas and smudge and all that fun stuff. But then I want to like tap into more like color theory. And I think about like Angela's work a lot with that, because you'll look at like these major elements and then it's like everything is nested, like the color relationships are all kind of nested together, um, so that it's extra. It's like I don't know how to describe it, but it's um, there's more color vibration, but it's still people won't question it like, oh, that seems fake, or that seems um, surreal or out of this world. It's like, no, it's real, but it's vivid. So even in this foreground here, I'm using kind of some lumpy brown color. I might switch that up and push more purple by adding some more blue. So that's going to give me a little bit of purple to sneak into the shadows here. And this is where, color theory just starts to like work, because if I make the shadows a little more purple, it's going to make the light a little warmer. and you can start playing with color theory like that. Let me see here. And I still think this could be more yellow. So I'm going to take away blue, add red and green. I don't want to take away too much from what's happening up here, so I do have to be pretty careful. What I'm doing now, this is a little bit of a lazy habit. Um, it's, I guess, not a lazy habit, but when I learned to paint at a fine art school, they taught painting through the Impressionist painters. And so I have this tendency to just like sprinkle colors into an area, kind of like jump first, ask questions later type of deal. So I think that could work with this process because I have the solid grayscale. And I'll go and smudge that a little bit, just around some edges, you know. I don't want it to look necessarily like brush strokes. Okay. Um, I think the way that I'd like to just sort of close this painting out is a final pass on edges. You know, there's still things I'd like to push with the color here, um, but you know, there's always the next painting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate my layer, and I'm going to press Control E. I think that's going to flatten it. Yep, and apply my layer mask. So now I just have all of those layers compressed. And what I want to do, this is another Richard Schmid technique. Like Richard Schmid might be one of the best. I think traditional painters in general are just have an advantage when it comes to edges because naturally, um, traditional painting gives you that ability, but with digital, you have to be a little more diligent and kind of break up your edges. So what I want to do is I've got a smudge brush here, and I just want to go around and strategically smudge to just give a little more breathing room, um, because you know there's a lot of sharpness, a lot of sharp edges everywhere, and that's really not what this place is like. There are sharp things like foxtails and cactuses and coyote teeth and um, okay. So what I'm doing is I want to create a sort of a feeling of a flow. So if this is my focal area, what I want to do is just create like maybe some paths. You could break this down into a science. I think Richard Schmid does that. John Park does that. A lot of people do that. Um, so study other artists and learn how they're treating their edges. I'm just trying to create. I'm making this map here so that when I go to smudge, I'm going to break up edges that are too sharp, and it's going to make a soft edge, or hopefully even a lost edge, which is even softer than a soft edge. And it's going to let the viewer's eye go to the focal point more easily. And it's going to take away kind of unnecessary sharpness. Really smudging. The cool thing here is like I can go back and paint, right? So I can take that smudge, color pick from it, and you know, kind of work in a more opaque instead of soft. Like you can use thick paint and just um, if the values are close enough, it'll create a soft or lost edge. So I'll let that kind of be there. I'm going to try a big smudge here. We'll see. Oh, so another thing you can do is just put a mask on your thing. I'm still going to smudge some of the white. Okay. So yeah, this is kind of the final steps. I'm going to color pick there and just go back in with the brush because I don't want it to look obviously smudged. Kind of painting in a nutshell in some ways. Like you don't want it to look obvious, but you still want to get your message across, even if that message is just like, check out how beautiful this mountain is, or flower, or whatever.
There's another question from Celestial asking, how efficient is this method of painting for TV animation?
Um, so I have never worked as a background painter for TV animation. Um, but I do know I have opened up some of their files, and I do know that they use a lot of layers. So being able to stack many layers and understand clipping masks and what are the other options? Clipping masks and layer masks. Layer masks are the black and white um, symbol over here. Clipping masks are when you actually clasp it to another layer. So understanding that is really important. Um, Understanding local color versus the color of light, super important. And I think that this process helps you, like, it just breaks that down into digestible parts. So yeah, I think this process is pretty useful for that. But I don't know, Franklin, you've done actual um,
Background painting. Yeah.
background painting.
Yeah, I echo pretty much what you say, and just like a lot of organization. So then, like, you're able to make edits easier too. And I definitely use a lot of clipping masks, locking, alpha locking, and layer masks itself too. And then all organized within folders.
Yeah. Do you color code your layers?
Yes, I do.
That's probably smart.
It helps when I color code folders, separating just background, midground, foreground. This way, I at least every time I know what part of the background I'm working on.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm just going in here, kind of adding little touches. For the most part, I try to use 100% opacity, but now I'm just for a few areas, I'm going to kind of glaze in and scumble in some paint, straight up digital paint. And I think I might kind of end the smudging there. So if we bring back the old version, this is, I'm going to toggle between unsmudged and smudged. unsmudged, and smudged. And so I think the smudge just lets air into the painting, especially when you're doing digital. It's a lot. Another thing I'm noticing here is that I wanted these more green up in here. And a simple way to do this would have been simply to take a color and make it more red. I'm going to make it a dull red, but I still need some sort of red up in here. It could be on the trail, kind of where this trail is. Let's see. Do I have the right? Oh, there we go. Just something to trigger the eye to like see the colors up there as more green. Maybe I'll make a darker red in some areas. You got to be careful because reds, in the distance, they get more blue added to them and they get dulled down. So I don't want it to be like garish, but maybe that's too subtle, but it's something. It's a little bit of red. And the very last thing is maybe put a color filter on it. I know that can be cheesy, but I do like the color lookup, which I showed at the start. Let me take this away, close this. I'll do color lookup and then, oh, actually, I don't think I did show this. But the color lookup is a way to, I'm just going to scroll through these to just get some color variation ideas. I kind of like that. Kind of warms everything up a bit. Kind of nice fall colors. Yeah, that's not bad. So I'm gonna remember that fall colors. Okay, I think it really depends on the mood you want. Sometimes I'll use this, if I call it a failure. That's a harsh word, but like if I sort of something just isn't uh, working with the color, there's no shame in messing around with other tools. So I will also put in here the color balance tool, which I like a lot. Before I do color balance, I will put levels in here also. So I've got the color lookup, which is going to make things warmer. And then with the levels, let me make this bigger. I don't have anything in my scene that is like a bright white. So I do hesitate to pull this. I don't know, actually. I was hesitating to pull this up to here because typically you want, if you're looking for maximum range, you want that to be there. And by there, I mean like this white arrow, like just touching where the levels bar starts. If you go past that, you're going to get overexposure. So I'll leave it there, just a little away. You can see that just pops the values a little bit. And because I spent that time on getting the structure right, the levels works okay. If your under structure is not working for some reason, then that's going to be, levels isn't going to make anything better. So with color balance, I could amp this up a little more by saying, like for instance, in the shadows, I want them to be a little more blue or cyan or some combination. And then in the highlights, I could make the lights a little more yellow. And if I added red, it would make them warmer as well. So I'm just going to go back through these. So that's the color balance change. So I find that color balance change pretty harsh. I prefer the fall colors, but I want to keep a little bit of it, so I'm just going to take this down to 20%.
We got
And
another
I'll, what was that?
Oh, we got another question coming in. Chris Rodriguez asked, "Do you leave the image flip until the very end?"
Um, no. So, flipping the image is just a way to like kind of shake you out of your when you've been staring at something for too long. So I'll flip it again here. I typically flip it back at the end, but I will flip it at the end just to make sure there's nothing glaringly off that I um, was looking past. Good question. I think it's good to kind of toggle back and forth.
Cool. Thanks, Sean. And you're
Yeah.
on the color stuff, the color light.
Oh yeah, the color balance. I'm keeping it on, but I just turned it down to 20%. And then one last layer clipped onto all of that. This is just another opaque paint layer. And it's just the bottom of these bushes is bothering me. So I'm going to bring back this and just think the shadow be darker. Some spots. Let's see here. And another thing, these colors here, they are getting a bit too saturated. I think having some desaturated lights might. It's too light. Just some grays in here. Looking at the photo, there are a lot of grays. Now, the danger of putting grays in here is it's going to make the oversaturated colors I have pop even more. So this could not be good, but let's see what happens. I'm just going to sprinkle some in here. Another thing I like to do, this comes from traditional painting, when you have a mass of like different colors on your palette, is just pick the in-between. So I'll take this and pick an in-between color. And that way it feels harmonious. Break this up a little bit. This is turning into kind of a confetti vomit type thing. So I'm going to try to back this off with some noise. Maybe even go back and color pick and bring it back a little bit to reality. And there's just one other. Okay, this is what's been bothering me. I feel like there's some sort of like neutral gray or browns inside these bushes, and these bushes just right now feel too green. There usually is some variety in there. Let's see what is. Or maybe it's not green enough. It's a puzzle, right? So this was really cool to like, I guess, experience this place through painting. And I think that next time I go hike out here, I'll see things much differently and think of this painting experience and how um, yeah, I think it'll make my hikes even nicer.
Yeah, this is super insightful, Sean. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thanks for watching. It's always such a privilege to demo, on the Discord here, and I'm super excited for. I don't know. I'm sure everyone here is aware. There's like a whole lineup of demos for Plein April, and it should just be nonstop fun, and a little bit of playing. Okay. Does anyone have any last questions, or you can feel free to open up your mic. And the other thing I wanted to mention too is if you were drawing or painting along, if you want to drop a JPEG in the special event chat or the I think special event chat would be good for that. Feel free. I'm gonna hang around here for a little bit more and just kind of noodle on this, but thank you so much everyone for coming out, and good luck on your plein air excursions.
Thanks, Sean.
Hey, thanks, Matt.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.